Hey, welcome back to Born to Climb. And today we have an incredible guest, Colonel Tom Magness. Colonel Tom is a West Point graduate. He's a seasoned military leader, and he's an expert in leadership development. From training soldiers to managing billion-dollar construction projects in Afghanistan, he's here to share hard-earned leadership lessons that you don't want to miss. In fact, in this episode, we talk about what makes leaders great, how to navigate tough decisions, and the simple but powerful strategies that drive results in both military and in business settings. He's also a personal friend of mine, and if you're looking to sharpen your leadership skills and learn from one of the best, then stick around because this conversation will change the way you lead. Let's go ahead and dive in. Colonel Tom, nice to see you again. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Good to see you, buddy.
You went to West Point. Why is West Point so renowned for its leadership development?
Well, it is the United States Military Academy, the military academy for the Army, and it was. I guess they've been doing it for a while, so that's probably one thing. 1802 was year one for the United States Military Academy. But, it's a learning organization. It's really interesting, how they do leader development continues to progress. And, as an old graduate, I'll look back and say, it was so much harder when I was there, but it's so much different, because they continue to evolve. And, I just think it is the best leader development, laboratory we have, I think, in our nation. And I'm maybe biased, but pretty proud of what they do there.
If we were to compare a leader that comes out of West Point today versus when you came out, what would be the difference in those two people?
Well, I think it's context. When I went to West Point, I graduated in 1985. So I was there 1981 to 1985. There were no wars going on. In 1981, we were 6 years from Vietnam, but we had the Cold War. So, we had a Cold War mentality. Not likely we were going to have some big engagement, but that's what we were being prepared for. If you are preparing to fight the Soviet Union, they're a very linear enterprise. They follow their rules. They deploy their, tanks in a certain way, and they always do it this way. And so, in order to prepare as a leader, you just had to learn their rules and know how to defeat them based on how they deploy their formations. Well, you fast forward to what we're fighting now, and there are no rules. And we've seen that in the deployments, in Iraq and Afghanistan and all the other stuff where it is not linear. We describe it with an acronym VUCA, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so, what they're doing at the academy now to develop leaders who can operate in that kind of environment where it's not, memorize the rules and you'll be able to win. It's, how do you create and develop leaders who can adapt and who are resilient and can, figure it out on their own in an environment where there are no rules. So that's the kind of, progression that I think it's not the way it was when I was there, but I think they're doing an awesome job continuing to adjust to the times and respond to the enemy that we think we're going to face.
You do such a great job with leadership training and what your company does. And you and I have had a chance to do several projects together, which has always been great. When you look back at your time leading, and what would be one of the most difficult situations that you had to step into and lead?
Probably, I spent 4 years at the Army's National Training Center in California, 2-year tours. So I was there for 2 years. I went away for 2, and then I came back for another 2 years. And that second time I came back, we were in the middle of the storm. Going to use a different. We were in the middle of the storm in Iraq, and that was when roadside bombs were at their peak, IEDs. And I stepped into a training situation where we weren't preparing people for that, and I felt like it was a horrible injustice that we were doing at the training center, not preparing them for how they were going to defeat the number one killer on the battlefield. And I gathered my team together and said, we have to figure this out for the Army. We're engineers. I'm an engineer. My team, all my trainers at the training center, we were all engineers, and they were really solid guys. We had a full-time job, and I asked them to take on another job to help figure out how to properly train and equip these people that were a few months away from deployment to harm's way in Iraq, where they were going to face nothing but these IEDs every day. And yet we weren't preparing them that way. And it was the worst, injustice that I think I could imagine. But stepping into something like that was also one of the greatest experiences of my life. And it fortunately it was an interesting situation where my boss didn't want me getting involved in that stuff. But my boss's boss did. And so now what do you do? This is one of those scenarios for leaders. Okay, leader, what would you do here? Because my boss's boss would grab me out in the field, see my Humvee, he'd stop me and he'd ask, what are you doing about these roadside bombs? But my boss would grab me and go, hey, keep those roadside bombs out of this training scenario. We don't need to be messing around with that stuff. And but look, right was right, and I had to navigate through that chaos with my boss. But my boss's boss knew, as I did, that this was what we had to do. And, long story short, but I had a vision for what could be out there, and no better place than the Army's training center in the middle of the Mojave Desert to figure it out, where we could experiment. We could blow stuff up. We needed to have a vision for that. And, I'm pretty proud to say after 2 years, the Army's center of excellence for defeating roadside bombs was at the National Training Center when I left. So we created that from nothing, but it was in response to this chaos that I stepped into when I came back to that place.
How many lives do you think you saved by getting that into the National Training Center?
Well, me personally, I'd say none. But my guys, and it wasn't just my guys. It's an interesting sort of sidestep. One of the things that I wanted to try to figure out was, how do you look at this, what looks like chaos, where there's bombs everywhere, and figure out where the next one is going to be? Predictive analysis. This was before AI, but people were doing predictive analysis. And I found this place that wasn't far from where we were in the desert in California. The Navy had a surface warfare center with all of these really smart civilians that did data analysis. And so I went to meet with them, and I told them what we were trying to do. And I said, you got anybody that could, contribute anything? And they said, well, that's not what we do. We do surface warfare on naval ships, and we analyze rocket data. I said, but data's data. Give me a guy. Let me take someone out to the desert. So they gave me this young kid, super smart, and put him in my Humvee, and we drove around, and I showed him everything, and then I just turned him loose to start figuring stuff out. And he ended up getting like a $35 million DoD grant, to bring this to his headquarters now, where they were going to contribute that to this effort. But it was that kind of team. It was a total pickup team, just trying to get the right people to, figure out how do you make sense of the chaos, and there has to be a way. And eventually we won. IEDs stopped being the number one killer, and we got out in front of that. And but it was a team effort for sure, and that extended even, dare to say, even to the Navy, who helped us out immensely on that one.
Because you mentioned about your boss's boss and your boss and that whole dynamic, I was just actually on a webinar yesterday, and someone brought that up, that they were having a challenge with their boss, and that whole dynamic of the boss's boss. So, what advice do you have for people who are dealing with something with their boss, but it's their boss's boss that, in a sense, it's like this triangle? How does someone navigate that when they need something, but their boss isn't giving the green light, but the boss above them is?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, it wasn't comfortable. And, but, I had to play the game for sure. My boss is my boss, and the boss is always right. But, I had to just chip away at it. I could not come in, with a frontal attack, because I'm not going to win that one. He was a higher rank than me, and that wasn't going to be the case. But just chipping away, and at every opportunity trying to, frankly, to give him credit for what I was doing, and trying to make him look good. So that at some point it became his, and I could be okay with that. It was not through the frontal attack, for sure, because that's never going to work.
It's never going to work for sure. No, you got to be strategic about influence sometimes. Tell
Yeah.
me about the best leader that you've ever worked for or had in your life.
Yeah. Well, you met him. It was not, despite the fact that I've worked with and for some amazing leaders over my career. And, being at the National Training Center in California, I saw the best leaders in our Army, for 4 years. They would all pass through that place. I saw them all. And yet the best leader I've ever met was not in the Army. But once I retired and started working, transition into leadership development, and I met this CEO of a company called Abiomed. And that guy happened to be a West Point graduate. We met at West Point when he brought his company down, and I was doing some stuff with them on leadership, and we connected. And it didn't take me long just listening to him to hear this guy was something different. He had a vision. He was super smart, and at some point he asked me to come work for him, and I could not say no. And so for 2 years, I got a chance to be in the inner circle and see this CEO operate. I was doing leadership development programs for the company, and just watching him. And I know you've spent time with him as well, with Mike Minogue. And what he did was like a textbook on leadership. From teamwork, team building, strategic thinking, decision making, team dynamics. I mean, everything it's a textbook. And I still lean into that every day as I'm talking to people of what right looks like. I've seen it. He had the integrity that was the best I've ever seen. Just a complete man of integrity. He was super intelligent, but he was personable. He could connect with people, and he was the most driven leader I've ever seen. And he made it clear to me, and I sometimes ask this question in my leadership programs of what's the most important responsibility of a leader. Because, he made this clear every day in the organization. He made this clear to me. What is the most important responsibility of a leader? And I'll ask this in some of my leadership programs. And, you can imagine the answers people come back with, and they'll say, taking care of your people and communication. They'll just say all these things. And I'm like, yeah, that's important. That's important. That's not it, though. The most important thing, the most important responsibility of a leader is you have to deliver results. That's how we're measured. Whether you're in sports, whether you are in a business, you have to deliver results. If we're going to say, yes, that one, that's good. And he was driven to deliver results for the patients that were dependent on the output from this company. And he reminded people every day how important the mission was. He aligned them to that purpose. And people would run through a wall for him. And I would, even now. But that was without question the best leader I've ever met. And you have your own experiences. You spend plenty of time with him, and you probably could agree.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's how you and I met, is through working with Abiomed. Is you had me come in and do some of our 9 Minutes on Monday program there, and that's where I got a chance to meet him. And I worked with you guys for 2 years, when almost the same amount of time that you worked there when you brought me in. Mike's coming on the show in a couple of weeks. So for those of you who are listening, you'll get a chance to hear that interview.
Yeah.
But Mike, I've talked about him actually quite a lot when I'm speaking to other audiences, and I have not met anyone who was so driven and able to push people to take their performance to a higher level, at the same time have this incredible care and I've got your back and I am here for you. And that's so rare. I think that might be one of the most rare things in leadership. It reminds me of Jim Collins and the level 5 leaders that they
Yeah.
studied, how they had a professional will and yet a
Yep.
personal humility.
Yep.
And Mike had that, but I would add to that a true care for the people, both the patients, because Abiomed, for those listening, they make the world's smallest heart pump, amazing company, just got bought out by Johnson and Johnson, and yeah, that would be Mike. Cared for his people, was humble, but a driver for sure, and a real pace setter. I mean, he set the pace high, but he always exceeded it himself. It's amazing.
We had, he would take the company through a strategic planning process that he developed. I think he can certainly. I hope he will speak to that in the podcast, because I learned a lot watching him do it. It was textbook, but this process that at the end of that, everyone knew what they were going to do in the next 365 days, and everyone had to align their goals, their personal goals, to that plan. And you did nothing but what was on that piece of paper. One page, one piece of paper. Everything you did had to align to that piece of paper. Everyone in the company developed their goals in alignment to that piece of paper. And I will tell you, the goals were almost impossible. They were possible, but they were almost impossible. But they were possible. And that's where he set the bar. And it's like, he didn't back off from that. It's like, we're gonna push because it's important. And he incentivized people around the purpose and got everyone willing to commit to that because the purpose was so important. And I think any company that can do that, and you speak to a lot of that in what you do and in your book, but if you can align people around that purpose and give them the energy to commit to almost impossible but possible, and then hold them accountable to do it, he was, a lot of autonomy. He trusted people. He's very loyal, and people were loyal to him for all the reasons that you could imagine.
And Abiomed is around 4,000 employees, but if one person went to the hospital, I mean, Mike knew about it. He was going to reach out to them, and he personally would take that on. And, that's amazing. When we work with hospitals, one of the things we'll do is we'll talk to the CEO and we'll say, hey, we want you to go meet every new patient when they come in. And for some CEOs, that's like, huh? Like, no, I'm like an administrative function. And we're like, you're the CEO of the hospital. And when every new patient comes in, you're going to go meet them. And of course, that's our suggestion. And but when they do it, it makes a complete difference, right? It's bridging that gap coming out of the tower and coming down. He was so great at that. Anyways, again, for those of you who are listening, if you're intrigued, Stick around in a couple of weeks. We'll have Mike Minogue on the show. So excited about that.
Yeah, I would be excited for them because that's a gift, and I'm glad you're doing that.
Maybe we'll bring you into the interview. We'll both be in there. I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, you just tell them Colonel Tom said hello.
I will.
I never had that title until that, and of course that's what you'll call me too, right, James? But that wasn't a thing until that's what Mike would call me, Colonel Tom, and so throughout the company, my 2 years, I was Colonel Tom.
Well, that's how I met you. That's the only way I know you, Colonel Tom. So
Yeah.
let's talk about Afghanistan. You were over there and you had to manage a project where it wasn't just people from the Army that you had to organize. So you had to build a team that was pretty diverse. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that whole experience, that project, what you learned?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to communicate this in a way that people will believe it, but I am sincere when I say it was probably the best year of my professional life. Being away from my family, being in harm's way in Afghanistan, and taking on a very difficult challenge for 1 year was probably the best year of my professional life. I got there at a time when, we had the surge in Iraq, and we were, getting all the forces there to try to ultimately, get the mission done. Well, I got there as the surge transitioned to Afghanistan. So that became the center of our focus as a nation militarily, winning in Afghanistan. And so lots of troops coming in, and I was with the Army Corps of Engineers. And so we do construction. We built all the infrastructure for our own military, and then all the infrastructure for the Afghan military and the Afghan police. And, kind of as a result of the surge, my program essentially tripled to about $5 billion in 1 year that I was responsible for. And it tripled, but I couldn't triple my people. I had to triple my output without tripling the people. And but the projects were amazing, and the opportunity was amazing. And I'm not a real smart. I'm an engineer. I'm not real technical. I know enough. The team is primarily civilian, so I think I had about 1,500 people, and of those 1,500, maybe 100, and they were scattered across the country in Afghanistan. Project offices managing construction work throughout the country. But they were all civilians. I had about 100, let's say 100 military, and the rest were all civilians. And these are people who volunteered to leave their job in the United States with the Army Corps of Engineers and come to Afghanistan. And we did engineering and construction and some phenomenal work. But to assemble a team, I had Army and Navy and Air Force and Marines in uniform. I had civilians. And then I had, probably another 1,000 or more Afghans working for us, because there were places we could not go comfortably. We're engineers, but we didn't have tanks. We couldn't go in all muscled up and kicking indoors. That's not the kind of outfit we were. So, if things got hot, you're not going to be hammering nails. That's not the time to do construction. And when things got hot, I wasn't able to send a civilian into some of those places. And, but we had to be good stewards of all this money that, the taxpayers were funding all this work. We had to make sure it was done the right way, quality control and that sort. So we had to get eyes on every project every day. and some of those eyes were Afghans. And so to train them up on what to look for, and they're smart people and they're, engineers. They had gone to Afghanistan University and got their engineering degree and came to work for me and my team. But sending them out into harm's way to make sure that we were doing the right thing and being able to report and taking pictures, and so this was our team, and just a phenomenal group doing an amazing mission, and it was super fun.
How did you get everyone to work together? Because even I know people joke around about it, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, not always working well together, although I think they probably work great in the field. But you had that, then you had civilians, then you had the Afghan people. How did you get everybody to be on the same page? Because I think this is a great question for all leaders, because as you know, in our field, we will get people talking about it's so difficult leading the different generations in the workplace or remote work. Like, all leadership has a problem. But at the end of the day, it's, as Mike Minogue says, it's to produce results, which you're going to do through people. And people, when they work in an aligned team, are amazing. But that comes with challenges. So how did you get what were the biggest challenges in bringing that group together, and how did you do it?
I mean, I guess as far as challenges, we were our worst enemy. Engineers can be very fixed on how things are done. The way the brain of an engineer, they are creative rule followers, if that makes sense. They have that part of their brain that is problem solving, and they're very creative. But they also have that part of the brain that says, turn to this table, look at this line, this is how many things we need, and that's engineering. So when you have a creative rule follower, when I got there, it kind of inherited some things that didn't make a lot of sense. And we were spending an awful lot of money. For example, we were putting air conditioning into the barracks for these Afghan soldiers. They don't know anything about air conditioning. They don't know how to maintain air conditioning. And frankly, they don't even want air conditioning or need air conditioning. What they were happy with was ceiling fans. But we tried to use standard engineering, documents and plans and specifications and try to lay that down on Afghanistan. And we're doing crazy stuff like that, putting in central air and central heat. They just needed a ceiling fan and a wood stove, and trying to get engineers to think differently about how to deliver and meet the needs of the customer, and really listen to the customer. One of the early problems that I found as I was going around looking at the ongoing construction work, once the Afghans would move in, we found that the sinks had the gooseneck faucet, right? And they were all pulled off the wall. And we'd go and look at the restrooms, and all the sinks with those gooseneck faucets would be pulled off the wall. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Well, it turns out that the men, when they had to do their prayers, they needed to wash their feet. And the only way to do that was kind of get up on the sink, hold on to the faucet while they're washing their feet, and they pull the whole thing off the wall. And so, okay, maybe we should listen to their needs and put in a way for them to do that without tearing up the sink. And so putting in a trough for them to be able to wash their feet. And so just making those kind of adjustments that are not what we do in the United States, but was what was appropriate for the conditions we were operating in, and then trying to figure out how to do it faster. Because we were taking, to build a military compound with the barracks and the dining facility and the training ranges and the motor pool for the vehicles and this and that, would take us, upwards of 3 years to finish something like that. Well, we didn't have 3 years. And I didn't have 3 years. I was there for 1 year. I wasn't going to sign up for a 3-year construction timeline. Let's get this done. And really challenging the team to think differently. I made it clear, here's what we had to get done. I don't know how to do that, and empowering them to come back. We have a process that we leverage very heavily where I made my intent clear. Here's my intent. And my engineers, my staff came back and said, here's how we will meet your intent. To give them that autonomy, give them that ownership. These were all their ideas, but we ended up, coming up with ways to cut the construction timeline down to 180 days, using different materials, simplifying the construction, getting away from all the complications of, central air and heat and things that probably an outsider could step in and figure it out. But we were just so in it, and our engineers just couldn't see it. But empowering them to think differently, and they came up with some really creative ways to get the mission.
That's a great story. And I think that's one of the best things a leader can do, is to engage their people to think on the solution of things. In other words, to make your problem their problem. I remember I was doing some leadership training with one of the car rental chains, and I was talking to the CEO after, and he had said that they were trying to come up with a new revenue stream, and they wanted to brainstorm about this. And so what he did was he called a meeting to brainstorm, but who they invited to this was the people who vacuum out your car when you bring it back, right? That we bring it back with Cheerios and milk spilled, and the people that clean the car, he brought them to the meeting, and they were the ones that ended up coming up with a new truck leasing fleet that they were going to do. And he was just sharing that story about how you don't realize how much wisdom and knowledge is in your organization, because as you know, as leaders, we do see a lot of the land, but there's a lot that we don't see because we're not in it. And to your point about them ripping the sinks off the wall, just because you guys just didn't know that. But then, as you know, you react, and that's fantastic.
Well, I had a drumbeat of a message that I tried to communicate at every turn, a simple message. We did a town hall at my headquarters every week, because we had a high turnover. These volunteers were coming. We had about a 3% turnover every week. Most corporations would not survive with that kind of turnover. So I do a town hall, and I would, share this simple message. This is what we're trying to do. And it was 3 things. And I just beat the drum, beat the drum, beat the drum, beat the drum, until I would have people come up to me before the town halls and go, "Colonel, we know what you're going to say." I'm like, yeah, it's working now. It's working. But there were 3 things that I tried to emphasize to them. Number 1 was finish your projects. Don't be in construction. Be done with construction. And number 2 was meet your commitments. Find ways to stay on schedule, because, in construction, things can slip, and we cannot allow that to happen. And so, just being ruthless on milestones and getting those commitments met. And then the third one was build capacity so the Afghans could take over and we could leave. And that was the one my engineers probably needed a little extra push on, because they got the first 2. That's just engineering stuff. But tell me again, why do we have to work with the Afghans? Why do we have to teach them safety and construction standards? What are you trying to do to empower these Afghan construction companies? Why do we have to do that? But, I had to go a little harder on that one to make sure they understood this is how we win. We've got to be able to leave. We got to be able to turn this over. But, the kinds of things that allowed us to do, we were empowering these Afghan businesses. And, we had a awards. We did a construction company awards dinner at one of the hotels in Kabul. And these Afghan, they had never experienced anything like this in their lives. That's not a thing. And the excitement that I saw from the Afghans, like, just to be nominated, I think they didn't win, but they were so happy to be nominated when they heard their name, just the recognition. You talk about that all the time. I saw what recognition did for these people, and they were man kissing and just so happy to be nominated. Just it meant so much to them. And these were our partners. And that's what I was trying to, communicate to my team is we will win if we can equip them, empower them, enable them to be able to take this mission from us. And so investing a lot of time into that kind of stuff as the commander, the CEO, that was the kind of plank of my drum beat every single day, and then letting people figure out how they were going to deliver on those three things.
For those listening who are leaders right now or managers, you literally got to rewind the last 7 minutes and just listen to that whole part again, because Colonel Tom just gave so many great leadership truths there. One of that being the importance of communication that's clear. Like you said, this is how we win. And so many companies, they don't do that. So if you were to ask the average employee, how do we win? They'd be like, what do you mean? But when people know this is how we win, and as you know, I've seen so many times where the leaders will say something once or twice and they'll think, well, I know I already said that, not realizing that you just have to keep a simple message. And as you said, just keep hitting that drum, because you're competing for all the different noise of the tasks that everyone has to do. And the more of a simple language and a simple message, we're working with some organizations right now, some manufacturing companies. And one of the things that we've noticed is that when you have a simple message, that's what gets passed on. So one of the things we pass on is the concept of deposits and withdrawals. It's just a simple way to think about leadership, right? Like a withdrawal is you're holding someone accountable, you're asking them to stay late, you're asking them to work when the air conditioning's out. All these are things that take away. And so what are you going to, you need to cover that. You need to cover that withdrawal with a deposit. That can be caring about somebody, genuine interest in their life, reward and recognition, training them. So, but the more we talk about deposits, withdrawals, I was out there at this plant a couple of weeks ago, and I was getting with the frontline leaders, the team leads they're called, and I would ask them, hey, what are your wins since we last spoke? And so many of them started talking about deposits, and they would use that language. And when you can find a simple language, don't think that, oh, I don't want to keep saying the same thing. Now keep saying the same thing. That's what resonates.
Well, it's the concept of a drum beat. One of my mentors in the Army educated me on this idea of, when you're messaging, is it a drum beat, the kind of drum beat that in the military allows everyone to get in step and, move in formation, move together because you're listening for the sound of the drum, and every time the drum beats, your left foot hits the ground? Or is it like, I love the world's greatest rock band, Foo Fighters. Is it like that, and your arms are flailing, and you're hitting on everything, and your hair's flying, and sweat's everywhere? Like, is that what your drum sounds like? Which, while I love that rock band, that's not going to get people in step. Simple, consistent. Here's what we got to do to win, and I think that's a thing that leaders have got to figure out when it comes to communication.
You are very creative, visionary. But the challenge is every week they have a new idea, and the team is like, oh, we're going in a different direction, because I've seen that many different times. What would you say to that leader to help them rein that in, or at least communicate more clearly?
Well, one, if you're doing that, you're probably not delivering on the number one responsibility of every leader, which is to deliver results, not to deliver ideas, but to deliver results. And so I would always go back to that and stay focused. Look, my brain works that way too. I think it helps to have a accountability partner to rein you in. In the Army, we have the blessing as a commander. You have a I don't know what, my right arm essentially was my sergeant major. And it was just someone that was not afraid to speak truth to power. That's what sergeant majors do. And if they feel like, and they see it because they've been around usually quite a while, a sergeant major, the senior non-commissioned officer in the organization, and having somebody like that that's not afraid to tell the emperor he has no clothes. And because people are people, and there are plenty whose brains are energized by being creative, and that's great, and we need that. But hopefully you got somebody that can rein you in and tell you the truth and make sure it doesn't get out of control. And I've had that good fortune in the military.
That's another fantastic thing about having a truth teller. I heard a story once about Winston Churchill, how he wanted to just get the truth about what was going on in the war on the front lines, and he felt like his generals weren't telling him the truth. And so he commissioned a separate group. And I don't even know if he told them about it, but their job was just tell me the truth, right? He just wanted to know what he was working with. So, but great point about, again, for those of you who are leaders or CEOs or you're running a company, who do you have that speaks truth to you? Because we all need that.
Yeah, no doubt. I wish everyone had a sergeant major. They are, there's something unique about those individuals in our military, and they know everything. Everything that the CEO, the commander doesn't know, they know. They know, who's mad. They know who's got issues. I mean, because all that bubbles up to, they're not going to tell the commander, but that's going to reach the sergeant major. And just to have that person in my career, it's been a godsend.
Looking back to your time in Afghanistan, which you shared was just such a favorite time for you, can you think of one day that stood out among all of them as that was just a great day?
God, there were a lot of great days. I'll certainly get to. I'll get probably my number one, but my idea, my drumbeat was meet your commitments, finish your projects, build capacity. And in the finishing your projects, I made sure, because I know how much went into finishing a project there in Afghanistan, both from my team, but also from the Afghans. They were doing all the construction for the most part. These are all Afghan workers, Afghan companies, and they had legit skin in the game, and they were putting themselves in harm's way, and they were in many cases jeopardizing their own life, because if word gets out that they were helping the United States military with construction, who knows what could happen. So they had a lot on the line as well, and so a lot went into finishing a project, and I didn't want that to pass, and I made sure that when we finished a project, we would do that in a formal way with a ribbon cutting and a feast. And I made sure that if I could be there, I would be there for as many as I could. Well, we got to where we were finishing a project somewhere in the country every single day, at least one every single day. So that's a heavy volume of work to be finishing a project every single day. And I ate a lot of kebab. And there's no telling what kind of sanitation practices were happening behind the curtain there, but I wasn't going to lose the war for that. I'm going to eat whatever they put in front of me. I did learn a hard lesson, and that is you don't want to schedule a feast when you cut the ribbon at a wastewater treatment plant. Wastewater treatment plants often have a lot of flies, and all of a sudden they put that tray down in front of me, and it just covered in flies. I'm like, what do I do now? I can't not eat it. I can't lose the war because of me. But it was the nastiest thing I've ever done. It's like getting flies off just to get it into my mouth. But look, it was important, and the feast is not about the food. It's about the recognition. It's about the celebration. And, I remind the people I work with in leader development all the time about missing those wins and letting them pass you by. And it's hard to catch up. It's like, shoot, I missed. That was a couple of weeks ago. Let's do it now. It's just not the same. Those moments are important. I would say probably my best day, I mentioned it earlier, but going back to that awards dinner we did for the Afghan construction companies. I tried to make it like Hollywood, and, they've never experienced anything like this in their life. And we had all these categories, and we came up with some trophies and this and that. But to see the joy of these people and knowing how much how hard they were working to deliver on our mission, and it was the best day for me, just seeing how happy they were and how much they appreciated being recognized. That was a great day.
That sounds like a great day. What did you love most about working with the Afghan people?
Um, they were genuine, humble, sincere people that wanted just as badly as we did to win. They had families at home that they wanted to take care of, and they just wanted peace. And they were smart. They have a number of universities in Afghanistan. I was headquartered in Kabul, and they had at least 3 major universities there in the city, all of which had engineering programs. I worked to make sure that we could invest in those engineering programs. We bought textbooks. They teach engineering in English in those Afghan. English is the universal language of engineering. You got to know English. And so we bought textbooks for all these universities to invest in those engineer programs, because, hopefully we established an intern program to bring them out and come work for us, and then hopefully stay once their internship was done and be a part of our team. But they were smart, creative people that wanted just as badly as my guys did to win and be able to go home to their families.
So, Colonel Tom, what happened on the U.S. pullout of Afghanistan?
Well, I have a hard time thinking that was planned well. No plan is perfect, but the way I teach it when we do some of our leadership scenario planning kind of stuff is test your plan before you go live. And even if you don't have a lot of time, at least test it against 2 possibilities. One is, what's the most likely scenario? Test it against that condition. And then the second is, test it against the most dangerous scenario. And as long as you've accounted for those kind of bookends, most likely and most dangerous, what really happens is going to be somewhere in between, and you probably have, at least thought about what you need to. But I feel like we did not test our plan against the most dangerous scenario. And we got the most dangerous scenario, which was, not a total surprise, but certainly people could have seen something coming like that would say, hey, this would be the most dangerous thing. If this happened, we're in big trouble. All right, well, how does our plan stack up against that? I just feel like that did not happen. And we had an idea, executed an idea, not a plan. The idea was, let's pull out. But the plan could not possibly have made any sense to give up the bases that we had used as the hub forever. It could not have been to fly. Kabul airport is, it's like taking an airport and put it in the middle of downtown of wherever the biggest city is near where listeners are living. It's in the middle of the city. That's not the place where you'd want to be extracting all of your people from. We had a base that was the main base in Afghanistan, Bagram Air Base, which is essentially in the middle of nowhere. We have complete control of that environment. We have the ability to detect any bad guys that might be probing the perimeter. To give that up, it just says we didn't have a plan. We just executed an idea, and it was chaos.
Did you have some relationships from Afghan people that got left behind that weren't supposed to?
Uh, I tell you, in the aftermath of all it, really even before, the worst, we lost to 13 Americans, and even before that, when stuff was going downhill, I was getting emails every day. And unfortunately, a lot of these guys, I didn't know them. I mean, they knew me because I was the colonel, and somewhere in my organization, they might have touched. They would send me a copy of a certificate that I had signed for them, out on some construction site or whatever. But, would you vouch for me? That's a hard one. But I had a number of people that I did know well that I was able to, work through. There was a process to get them out of there, and was able to do that for a few, but not for all of those. And there, all of those people that helped our country on construction projects and being the eyes and ears for the United States military on these $1 million construction efforts. And we promised that we'd do something for them, and then we turned our back. It's horrible. It's horrible. But yeah, I know, and I still know many who were there and are, in contact regularly, still trying to figure out how to get them out.
It was such a surprise, especially because, one of the things the military is known for is even like red teaming, right? That critical thinking and
Yeah.
looking at what could go wrong and things like that. So, as you said, yeah, it's hard. It's a head scratcher for sure. Well, as we wrap up our time here, first of all, thanks. It's been great to chat with you. What advice would you give to somebody who's listening right now and they're a leader and they want to get better as a leader? What would be the main areas that you would say, like, hey, there's a lot of things you don't have to be perfect at, but if you're going to focus on just a couple things that you want to excel at as a leader, what would those be?
Well, I might say two things. Number one, deliver results. Don't ever get confused on what should I be doing right now. What is my role? Why am I here? Why do I exist? Deliver results. But the thing that I would encourage every one of your listeners to do, and I think you probably, if I'm not mistaken, you have some products that could help them with this, is figure out your leadership philosophy. It is a really hard exercise, but it is so worth it to put pen to paper. I mean, every one of your listeners has a philosophy currently, so that's the good news, but it's in their head. But to try to make sense of that, to have that introspection and identify what's important to you. What are your beliefs, your values, and your operating principles that you could communicate to the people around you? And it's such a powerful exercise, one, to go through and do that. I limit the people that I work with, to limit them to one page. If you could get that done in one page of what is your philosophy on leadership, the transparency that comes with that, when people can understand and not have to guess, but the accountability, one, that you could hold yourself to that standard that you've created for yourself. And, without doing that, it's hard to hold yourself accountable, because what are you holding yourself accountable to? Well, put it in writing and then share it with your team and ask for their accountability as well. Every leader in the history of mankind that has tried to do that and go to their team and say, hey, guys, give me some feedback. I want your feedback. And in the history of mankind, there's only one response. Doing great, boss. You're doing great. Yeah, thanks a lot. Good feedback. But if you could say, hey, read my leadership philosophy and give me 2 ups and 2 downs. Give me some things that you think I'm doing really well, and what are some things that maybe aren't perfect? I mean, it's not horrible, but it's not perfect. That if I could get that from my team, That's feedback. That's accountability. And that is an exercise that it's very difficult, but it is so rewarding to have that thing, to be able to reference it on a regular basis, to be able to provide that to your team as you go forward. It's a living document, but that exercise is one that I would encourage all your listeners to give that a shot.
That is such a powerful exercise. I learned that from you. I had actually not heard of that before. And I learned that from you, and definitely I pass it on to others. What I love about it is that it gives you the clarity that, this is what it means to lead for me. And also when your people read it, it's that snapshot, or let's say somebody's new to your team. You can give them this document and they know instantly what's important to you, what's not important to you, what your values are. And the last thing you said there, which is so key about the accountability. I was recently speaking in Cape Canaveral, and I asked the audience, I said, how many of you in here have ever had a boss apologize to you? And it was a group of about 150, and maybe 3 or 4 hands went up. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because we typically apologize to our boss, right? That we didn't do something. But all the time, as leaders, I'll just speak for myself, all the time I am letting someone on my team down because I didn't do something I was supposed to do, or I wasn't consistent with my philosophy. Well, that's a moment for an apology. That's a moment to take ownership yourself. And even if I love the example you gave, like, hey, give me 2 ups and 2 downs. And when you solicit that, not only does that help you, but that does so much for your staff. Makes them feel like, oh, my boss is humble. They want to learn. They value my input. So many good things come from that. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Colonel Tom, how can people get in touch with you? Like, for those of you who are listening, Colonel Tom has an amazing company. They do great leadership training. Colonel Tom has some amazing exercises where they take you out in the field as well and get you to really work as a team. But what would be the best way for people to reach you?
Through our website, www.eagleleadership.com. Eagleleadership.com. We got a great team. All my buds from the military, a lot of other colonels, and had a vision for one day being able to work with my friends. And I love the team that we have. They're some great professionals, diverse experiences. My cousin is also on the team. He's Air Force Colonel. We let him get in somehow, snuck in one night, and he's on the team. We have a great team, and eagleleadership.com.
And we'll have all of that in the show notes. You can go to jamesrobbins.com/podcast and look up Colonel Tom Magness, and you'll find that there. Colonel Tom, thanks for being here. The last thing I want to say to you, just really to honor you, I am so glad our paths crossed, and the friendship I've been able to build with you over the last couple of years. I admire you in so many ways. You have such wisdom and experience about leadership that I love, and I've learned so much from you, but also maybe even more importantly to me, just your heart that you have for people, as evidence even in the stories you told today about working over in Afghanistan. But I've seen it here. I've seen it with the teams that you work with. I've seen how much you care for your clients and wanting them to get results. So you're just you're a 5-star general in my books for sure. Anyways, Colonel Tom, thanks for being on the show.
All right, buddy. Thanks a lot, and right back at you.